Hi guys, welcome to my Spring Talk. So in today's presentation, I will show you the process behind the making of Underwater, which is a short animated film that I made during Com Arts. So yeah. To begin with, I'd like to talk about the inspiration for this project. So I grew up watching a lot of animation, and that is some, and from there I began drawing a lot. But as I drew and painted more, I realized that my true passion still lies in what originally got me into art, which is animation. And I thought Com Arts would be a good chance for me to explore that medium even more. Um, and these two images that I have on the slide right now are kind of the inspirations that I had for these projects. Um, they were kind of image cues of what I wanted the project to look like. A big part of it was kind of like a broad ocean where the objects on the ocean were reflected in the sea, as you can see over here with the train and with the bike. Um, so this was kind of what originally kickstarted the project. So um, now I want to kind of talk about what the animation process is actually like. So to begin with, you start off with a storyboard, which is kind of the general layout to make sure you have everything all done right. And you kind of know what the animation is gonna be. Um, and then you move on to the layout stage where you kind of design each shot and make sure everything is in line. From there, you split up into background and keyframing and cleanup, which background you drawing the background, which is the environment that the characters are in, and then the keyframes basically are individual images that kind of um, describe the poses that the characters go through. And as you play those keyframes through quickly enough, they start becoming an animation. So on top of the main work process, you also have to do some like extra design, which is here, and it's kind of like character sheets and background design to kind of make you understand what your characters are gonna look like, what your backgrounds are gonna look like, and yeah. So when I did my animation, I didn't I followed pretty closely to what this diagram showed, but there are some small differences. Um, yeah. So to begin with, these are my character sheets slash background design. So on the top left, I was trying to figure out what the world was gonna be like for my animation, and I figured out. I mean, I knew it was gonna be on the sea somewhere, but what is the character gonna be doing there? What is it gonna be like? Is it gonna be rainy? Is it gonna be sunny? And the top left is kind of a prototype, which I ended up with, and that is what also ended up being the final project. On the bottom right, it's a character design sheet where I kind of try to picture what the character will look like in different angles, because as you draw animation, you have to depict the character in different shots, and from there you really need to make him consistent, which is why doing a character sheet beforehand will help you truly understand what the character will look like from 360 degrees. Um, on top of that, I also added some swatches for the color of his shirt, his eyes, his hair, and his skin tone, just to make sure I keep it consistent throughout the shots. And yeah, so after the design phase was done, I moved on to background and animation. So for background, I decided to learn how to use Blender, which is a 3D modeling program. Um, I decided to do that because I realized that as a single man animator team, I couldn't I didn't have the time to hand paint every single background, especially for what I wanted to do. So I needed a more efficient way, and to do that, I needed to understand how to you know generate um generate different shots of the same image but from different angles. So I ended up having learning to use Blender. On top of that, I already knew how to use Clip Studio Paint, which is what I did my 2D animation on. So I kind of used a mixture of these two programs to achieve my final product. Um, so this is what the interface of Blender looks like. So to begin with, I started by from modeling the object or the environment, which is the house that was in my original prototype. And after I did that, I need to decide what the texture and the colors of the object and the environment will be. So for wood, you have to consider, okay, there's gonna be wood grains. What color it has to be for the sea, how reflective it is. Maybe give it a slightly a blue tint to make it more ocean-like. And then once I have the textures decided, which is shown on the bottom right, I moved to the final phase, which is on the top right, and that is when I started putting in the lighting for the scene. Where is the sun at? How will the reflection play out? And as you can see, that's when I started implementing the little reflections that I really wanted for this project for the house. And other than that, not only did I have to animate, the clear house that it's in, I also had to do more detail work, such as decorating the interior of the buildings. And to do that, I had to individually model different objects, such as chairs that the character might use, beds that the character is gonna wake up from, bookshelves to make it more like it's a lived-in space. So yeah. So from there on, um, I begun storyboarding for my um for my animation. So to the left is an example of what a pro storyboard would look like. Um, as you can see, his is a lot more simplified. Some of it doesn't even have a background in, but that's because he's storyboarding for a full length movie, which means he has to be more efficient. To the right, this photo on the right is what my storyboard looks like. Um, One big difference you might be able to see is he has a lot of notes, and that's because he has to communicate with the team. But for my own project, I knew exactly what I wanted. I just needed to make sure I can remember. And these thumbnails by itself are enough to kind of remind me about what each shot is going to look like. So as you can see, that's just the photo on the right is just a quick preview. But as you can see, it kind of documents what each action throughout the film will be and how it's going to be depicted through a camera. So once the planning phase is done and I got the background all set up, I begun animating. So here's a quick video of me keyframing in Clip Studio Paint. So that video is about 11 seconds, but in reality, it probably took 30-40 minutes to get a couple of keyframes in. Um, so yeah, animation is really time consuming because you have to go through each frame and draw the character in very similar but slightly different poses so they move together once you play the keyframes through fast enough. Um, so it's definitely not an easy task. And once you put all of those keyframes together, you get something like this, which you can get the general motion of, but as you can see, it's very stiff and it's not smooth at all. So that's what keyframing is kind of like. And after that, you have to do in betweens, which means you'll have to draw a picture every 12th of a second to make sure it's smooth enough and that it becomes a smooth flowing animation. And that means it's a lot of work, basically. So here I have a video of what my daily life was like during quarantine when I was animating. Yeah, so that was pretty much what it was like for me because I would wake up, I'll be done with class at 1 in the morning and I wouldn't be able to sleep. So I would be drawing and I would just keep on working, drawing pretty much very similar drawings over and over again because I was on a time crunch and it was it was tough, but I thought it was very rewarding, especially once you see your characters begin to move together, and I had a lot of fun overall. So yeah. So let's talk about some challenges that I faced during this project. So obviously, as I said before, I had to merge 2D animation from Clip Studio Paint and 3D animation together. And although I think as a beginner, I did a decently enough job, but I like to hold myself to a higher standard. And I think there are still places where I cringe personally when I see it. And then there's in betweening overlapping poses. That's when like poses get really difficult and it becomes harder to see. And also, it was pretty hard keeping shots consistent throughout the film. So the first point about keeping merging 2D animation and 3D animation. I think this shot really demonstrates it. For me, I feel like the eagle or the seagull isn't really it's not really well integrated into the shot. Like you can tell there's a difference between the background and the bird. And I think I want I want my characters and my yeah, I want my characters to be living in the environment. And currently, although I can tell it's moving accordingly to the background, but I think it might be because of lighting, but it doesn't feel like it's living in it. And I think that's something that I have to work on for further projects. Oh. Next problem was overlapping poses. So let me show you the example. So if you look at this scene, um, right here, where the legs flip out, also, I think I did a pretty good job in doing it, but as you can see, there are some parts where the foot looks kind of wonky, and that's because when that's because foreshortening is really hard to manage to begin with, even just drawing still images. But on top of that, I have to imagine what it's like when it moves, when it is moving in space. And I think that caused a lot of problems for me when I was drawing. And if there was, I think that might be the most inefficient part of the process because I would spend a long time trying to get these poses down. And if in between pose is something I can usually get done in like 5 to 10 minutes, these like overlapping foreshortened poses would take me like 20, maybe like 25 minutes to draw one of them. So that is something I would also like to get better at and more efficient at. Um, Next up is keeping the shots consistent. So these two shots came right after. So the top left came first, and then it moved on to this shot over here. And I think the most important thing I think something you have to pay attention to is kind of the pace the character was walking at, um, as they transition between the two shots. In the first shot, you can tell he's walking very leisurely, but suddenly once it's cut to this shot, the character starts speeding up a lot more, and I think um that is something I still need to work on. This shot on the bottom right is already redone, so this isn't the first version of it. The first version was even worse, but Miss Pixar told me to make some changes, and Miss Pixar pointed out the problems that I had, so I went back and made some changes, and it's slightly better, but I think it's still something that I need to pay more attention to. So yeah, I mean, overall, I think my project was uh, pretty successful. I think to expect, first of all, a amateur like me to um, animate animation that lasted a minute in the span of 2 months, 2.5 months, including which included planning and like designing everything and storyboarding. I think that is um I think that's kind of a pretty impressive achievement. But I still think as I pointed out earlier, there are still um parts of it that I can improve on, and I think hopefully in my future projects I'll be able to improve on the weaknesses that I have from this current project. So I'd like to thank you guys for coming to my spring talk, and yeah.